Thank you, Shri Pawar, for talking to all of us here, for all of our audiences. That was Shri Rajendra Pawar, the chairman of DSCI. And with that, we have come to an end of the inaugural session. And before I move on to our next segment, which is the plenary session, I'd like to make a few important announcements here for all of our audiences. Like we've mentioned before, we have the innovation box, which is in order to provide impetus to the growth of the Indian cybersecurity startups. DSCI has conceptualized the DSCI Innovation Box. It is the 8th edition of the Innovation Box this year, and we begin at 5:45 p.m. in the evening. So do stay with us to be a part of this segment, Innovation Box 2021. And as you may also be able to see on the top right corner of your screens, we have those little coins, and they represent the leaderboard, which is on the top right corner of the platform. And you can refer to the point distribution chart on how you can accumulate these points and gold coins. And the top three winners for all of our audiences will win cash prizes at the end of the program. So you can basically compete and accumulate your points and win a chance to be in the top three winners. Also, we are virtual this year, yet that does not mean that we do not have networking opportunities. There are immense opportunities on AISS 2021 for networking. You can explore, visit expo booths from the expo tab, and also can do your networking in the lobby area. And also, do not forget to share your feedback on social media using the official hashtags AISS 2021 and mention @DSCI underscore connect on Twitter to give us your feedback and your experience at the DSCI AISS 2021. And with that, now I'd like to begin with our next segment, which is the plenary session. And here we discuss on how to stop ransomware pandemic, the basic steps and the advanced approaches. Now, joining us for this session, we have Mr. Bob Adhar, BE CISSP, founder and CEO at Rantronics, Mr. Dipesh Kaura, General Manager at Kaspersky South Asia, Mr. Mathan Babu Kazilingam, CISO at Vodafone Idea Limited, will also be talking to us. Dr. Sanjay Behel, the Director General, CERT in, is also going to be with us on this session. He will, in fact, be moderating the session. And last but not the least, Mr. Unique Kumar, the Group CISO at CK Birla Group, will also be joining us for this session. As you may be able to see on your screens, we are now being joined by all of our panelists for this plenary session on how to stop ransomware pandemic. And with that, I'll now hand it over to Dr. Sanjay Behel, DG at CERT in, who is also moderating the session for us to take it over from here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Samriddhi, and good afternoon to everyone. And first of all, let me thank the DSCI for inviting me over and giving me this opportunity to be amongst this elite panelists which are there. I'm looking forward to learning a lot from them. Uh, we've got a very interesting topic today. So, my initial remarks on this would be as follows. See, ransomware has emerged as a major cybersecurity threat operated through a very interesting, professional, and mature transnational ecosystem. Operators of ransomware are driven by financial greed as the primary motivation. And the average ransom paid by victimized organizations has more than doubled in the COVID 19 era, reaching $312,493 last year, according to the 2021 Unit 42 Ransomware Threat Report. These figures just tell us part of the economic story, as the cost of system downtime and recovery often eclipses the ransom payment and the human toll in which is even more dire. The ransomware operators take advantage of vulnerabilities such as exploiting poor cybersecurity posture and practices, inadequate incident detection and response capabilities, abusing the same vulnerabilities of cyber assets as misused by conventional malware, and taking advantage of poor user behavioral habits to circumvent complex security controls with ease. Ransomware attacks carried out on essential ICT infrastructure can prevent goods and services from reaching citizens, thereby impacting not just the economic security but also public safety and national security. When you look at cyber extortion techniques by malicious actors, structures have evolved from single ransomware by encrypting the data to double extortion of encrypting data and decrypting or leaking the data to triple extortion where data leaks and PIR are often used to hold victim for extortions along with DDoS attacks to stall all business of the victim. It is observed that fully automated ransomware target individuals and the SME segment, while the semi-automated or human-operated ransomware target high-valued victims by using different entry vectors and payloads to avoid detection and attention by security tools and processes deployed by the victim organizations. During a ransomware attack, IT administrators often struggle to recover data and restore operations, while employees are idle. Meanwhile, senior leaders engage in intense internal deliberations, debating whether to pay the ransom or tough it out through the remediation process. Protecting against ransomware is a critical issue for all organizations, and today's panel discussion is only the start of building a mature and resilient cybersecurity posture. It's important to remember that you can't focus on a single piece of defense. You need a comprehensive cybersecurity program that enables you to identify, protect, detect, prevent, respond, and recover from threats. So, uh, I think the fundamental intent behind conceptualizing this panel was to think through urgent actions that may be required to fight back against the ransomware, which has assumed the shape of a pandemic and has been affecting multiple stakeholders in the ecosystem across the board and across the globe. So, with this, I am going to probably you know, ask a few questions to our esteemed panelists and looking forward for all of us to learn from them. Uh, so, let me ask the first question to open to all the panelists. Why do you think ransomware has now assumed proportions of a pandemic? And also, how the COVID pandemic has dramatically escalated the use of ransomware attacks? So, let me start with Bob, if he's available to take the question. Or shall we go to Dipesh?
Hi. Sure. Uh, Thank you, Sanjay sir. So, I mean, coming from an endpoint background and having having seen the peak of pandemics, fundamentally, what has led to the sudden rise of ransomware is that uh, the perimeter that the corporates had created around their network has completely dissolved. There is no perimeter today. So, and I mean, let's believe this, that there was no business continuity plan ever thought that we would be in a situation where all of a sudden all the rules that were created to improve and increase the security levels will suddenly be shattered overnight. So that has fundamentally taken the user in a scenario which is unprotected, and what has actually escalated the problems as per the way we see it is the lack of detection and response mechanisms, because more than 70% of the organizations were still not there in terms of detection and response, which has caused considerable amount of delay uh, for organizations to actually identify that they have been under an attack scenario, and users are not cyber trained or cyber mature about handling such kind of situations, which has only added fuel to fire. So that's the reason the entire pandemic around ransomware is directly hitting endpoints, and the conversion rate of a ransomware attack is way higher than what it was in 2019 or earlier. So that's what we see.
Matan, do you want to give your views?
Sure. So while I echo the sentiments of Dipesh, what he shared with regard to vanishing of perimeter, I would want to bring in a differentiated perspective on the perimeter has not vanished. The perimeter has actually gone around people and individually their own assets.
Yeah,
So
correct.
yeah, so the fortress that were built earlier were around corporate offices, data centers, etc. Now it is each and every individual we are expected to build a perimeter around them. So that's the first and foremost shift that has happened. By virtue of which, the other perspective that I wanted to bring was around the ransomware in itself. So ransom has not been a new ask, especially in the IT field as well. Ransom has been there for long enough. Ransom has been asked for two perspectives. One, whenever people render your infrastructure from unusable state. The second, making your information being not available for use. So ransom has been asked for both these perspectives. The difference that we are seeing now, post the pandemic era, is there is a tremendous shift of not focusing on your infrastructure being rendered unused, but the information becoming unusable. That's the dramatic shift that we are seeing, which I'm sure, Dr. Bail, you also echoed similar sentiments. Earlier, to bring down an infrastructure from not being rendered usable is to launch a DOS attack, etc. And ransom used to be claimed even for not performing a DOS or a DDoS attack on your infrastructure, right? So ransom for DOS. The ransom for information is peaking now because owing to pandemic, earlier the fortress, whatever was built around the information, which were largely isolated and kept in central infrastructure. Owing to pandemic, this information has diversified itself, gone back into historic days of pre-convergence into distributed manner that they are held today. So the threat landscape for an attacker today to find lucrative targets that are holding sensitive information is far more becoming common. So it is easy today for an attacker to try and compromise hypothetically an endpoint and presume that to be not presume, obviously by inspecting the sensitivity of the data that it holds, relatively look at as a very sensitive information and come back demanding ransom. So that's one of the trend shift that we have seen, because of which there is an increasing trend in ransom demands that are coming. On the other side, the benefit to the corporate, the way I look at it as a benefit is, given information has far more become largely distributed, you have redundant copies if not available in the central area with multi-art. So the ability for us to recover also has become furthermore greater, owing to the expansion that has happened in infrastructure, information getting distributed to multiple devices. So those are two sides that I would want to park my views here and expand the views over the conversation, Dr. Bayer.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. Bob, since you joined a couple of seconds late, I just want to repeat the question for you. Why do you think ransomware has now assumed proportions of a pandemic, and also how the COVID pandemic has dramatically escalated the use of ransomware attacks? So, if you would like to give your views, we'll be happy to learn from that.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you for having me as well. I feel that there is a perfect storm leading to increased ransomware attacks, and we will see this continuing. And the reason why I say that is, firstly, there is a what I call a temporary shift of criminals from drugs to cyber crimes. And the reason for that is that the traditional drug movement routes are impacted due to travel restrictions. Planes and ships are not traveling as often, and not many countries are open. So within the countries, there is tighter border control. Even within states and cities, there is tighter border control as well. All of these have resulted in what I call substantial drop in income um, for these criminals. So guess what? Ransomware appears to be an easier way. I mean, you can get people who would be happy to give you $50 million, without too much effort. So I kind of see that that's one shift that's happening. The other one is that there's geopolitical um, 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 politics that's happening rapidly. So here we're talking about US, China, India, Australia, UK, Europe. I mean, all of them. I mean, there's substantial shift in politics, um, and so that's kind of creating an environment as well. And I think the third one that has been mentioned already is the lockdown and restrictions, which are forcing millions of people to work from their homes. So the traditional data uh, that used to be locked up is now being taken away to a home environment and used in an insecure environment. So I kind of feel, yes, that's the case.
Excellent. Unique, let me listen to your views now.
Yeah. So thank you, DSI, for inviting me on this powerful panel, and it's a great opportunity, Dr. Bahal, to learn from you and from my fellow friends. The views I share are personal and not linked with my organization. So the philosophy is all about data, as you know, Mathan has mentioned, the information, right? So when you talk to the CEO or you talk to the board, the demand is today is to about the digital transformation, and it helps to have a new touch points for the business and new opportunities. And there's a huge data generation. We all know that data is the new oil. The better massage data, or I would say a useful analytics, which we have, there is more opportunity for business growth and better customer experience. So, if we remember that there were days earlier when we order a pizza, then we go to outlet and order, or then we do a phone call, then the mobile app came in, then then the other channels. Now there are 15 ways by ordering a pizza. You can order through Alexa, you can order through Facebook, you can order through WhatsApp and Instagram. A lot of ways, right? So this means we are more vulnerable to cyber attacks or the ransomware attacks as well. Secondly, although with the work from home, it's a new norm. The employees when working from home, they are behind not behind the firewall as in the corporate networks, and the posture or the security, I would say, is not up to that level. So these are the two things which actually are contributing to the ransomware attacks.
Thank you. I'll have another question to all the panelists. Uh, in your opinion, is there a need to coordinate efforts to develop a single, widely adopted ransomware framework that will help organizations prepare for and respond to ransomware attacks? And how should the enterprise go about developing a comprehensive defensive security posture? And what will be the key pillars or best practices for this? So, Matan, do you want to start off?
Sure, Dr. Bell. So first and foremost, while most of the cyber security function within a corporate has revolved around building strategy around three core pillars, right? So that has been the typical focus for most of the CISOs, which being protect or prevent, as they would want to call us, protect, detect, and potentially respond. Most often for a CISO, it stops over there. Yeah, these are the core three pillars. But from here is where over the past few years, it has expanded from a strategy standpoint to adopt what we call now as predict and the ability to recover. These two were not seen in the parlance of defending a corporate earlier. Predict was always seen from business angle. How do I predict customers buying behavior? How would I profile my customers, etc.? Not seen from a corporate's defending strategy. In similar manner, recover obviously were seen from recovering back from overall physical events or calamities that may happen, or disasters that may happen. To an extent, it also used to also take into account IT events and IT incidents that were happening. Cyber events were not considered in large to be part of the recovery strategy earlier. So the trend shift that I would want to say what has come forth the CISOs now is how do we get ourselves into the ability of predict and as well the ability of recover as part of the overall cybersecurity strategy that we may put forth. Now, coming back to the aspect around ransomware, ransom is actually rendering your data in an unusable manner, right? So it is for corporate to try and see how would I recover back from that incident, because the incident has already happened, right? So which essentially would mean my prevent has failed, my detect has failed, my ability to respond also has completely failed. So what are the chances do I have to comprehensively recover back from that post facto incident that has happened is the larger aspect that corporates are due to focus on. So while I state so, it is very, very critical for corporates to build a recovery framework. How would they want to recover back in business? Most often, even in the physical recovery or in the IT recovery, it has to be adopted by the corporate that you cannot come back in business comprehensively fully. Yeah, it is a stage by stage quantify what will you recover post a massive disaster or so, right? So in equal manner, even in cyber security, even including the likes of ransomware, you will have to quantify what would you want to come back first on. You can't definitely bring all your business. So sensitizing, quantifying, say 20% of my core business is what I would come back in operation on, say day zero. It might take for me a month for me to come back in operation 50% of what I was doing to taking about 6 months. So articulating this very well, because this is not going to be easy for any corporate to come back in business immediately post a large scale event like this, right? So quantifying this, uprising board, acknowledging these events, and then getting the relevant concurrence is very, very important. And thereby, I definitely feel a comprehensive framework should be developed. Is there a possibility? The answer is yes. Does it exist? Yeah, we are way too behind for us to build a comprehensive framework, sir. That's where I would allow the rest of the panel to share their opinion.
Yeah, interesting. So you diplomatically played everything. So, uh, Bob, your views on this, please.
Sure, thank you. Look, um, in addition to the measures that are being practiced today, I'm going to take a what I call an innovation that we are looking at. So I'm going to be happy to share my innovation and be happy to be challenged on this as well. Um, I'm talking about advanced protection measures. Um, and in this measure specifically, I want to talk about maintaining the confidentiality of the data before, during, and after ransomware attack. Um, and so we are seeing businesses say no to ransomware payments because they can restore, their systems from a ransomware attack. So they have backups and they'll try to restore. However, the criminals have taken this a notch further by displaying the sensitive data in a public environment. So employee data, salary data, health records, credit card numbers are being publicly displayed. So businesses, due to embarrassment and reputational damage, are basically ending up paying the ransom. So good privacy or security is about uh, protecting the data in a lot of depth. And and confidentiality by definition over here means that the data that's sensitive can only be viewed by the authorized person or application of the process. So the question is, how can we maintain the confidentiality of the data during that process? Now, if you look at some of the frameworks that are available, you've got ISO 27001, you've got NIST Cybersecurity Framework, you've got PCI DSS. So there's a number of different frameworks available that recommends taking a holistic approach to protecting your data. I want to look at the PCI model quickly. The reason for that is it's a little bit prescriptive, it's easier to understand, and it's easier for people to implement At a high level, PCI talks about 12 things you must do. And if you do those 12 things, your data is protected. Now, those 12 methods can be summarized in kind of 7 broad areas. It talks about a firewall. It talks about an antivirus malware protection. It talks about access control, network monitoring, security policy, physical security, and data encryption as well. So basically, the standard says if you want to protect your data, you must do all of that. So what happens, if you look at those methods, the cyber measures, and you try to answer the question: is the light turned on? Is the light off? Is it a one or a zero? Can I see the data? Can I not see the data when systems are compromised? You will find that with an antivirus, people can get through when it's compromised and the underlying data is in plain text. Similar comments apply to malware, ransomware type software. These things will compromise, so people will see that. So kind of when you look at all of them, encryption on the other hand is the only uh, technical measure that converts plain text data into a ciphertext. So some of the advanced methods are looking at making sure that the underlying data is encrypted or is another format so that when compromises happen, the data is not in plain text. So what I'm talking about over here is using encryption like an airbag in a car. Everybody's driving a car. Everybody knows they are a good driver, including myself, and accidents will never happen. But guess what? Accidents do happen. And when they do happen, you want that airbag. So I'm talking about using encryption as an added method which ensures that the confidentiality of the data is maintained no matter what happens. No matter what type of ransomware you have an attack, please maintain the confidentiality of the data. But I don't want you to just go and rush and buy encryption. Um, um, there are encryption and there are different types of encryption. I'm talking about enterprise grade encryption with access control, application whitelist, and so on. Kind of that's the advanced method I believe that the market is heading towards so that we can further protect this.
Thank you. Unique, do you want to give your views?
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. I agree with your viewpoint, and that is absolutely, very important. So, framework for ransomware protection eventually is must to have, Dr. Bahal. And as a standard, most of us, follow ISO 27001, NIST framework, and somewhere PCI DSS. But assuming if there is a standard which can help organization, and the controls are put in place, there's a proper audit, proper, the 6 months review, the certification, then the steering committee can also focus on, which can help actually for the information security teams to get some budgets on the technology or the people processes skill set, which are very important. Second is, if we have a certification body which helps in certification, that you have the standards follow. Again, you cannot have the 100% assurance, but there is a baseline which will be set up. So the approach for the ransomware is very clear. Like, we cannot protect 100% assets. So it is always better to have a identification of the critical crown jewels of the organization, which are important for business, and we can see what kind of data exposure do we have. Is it a healthcare data, or is it a data related to the PII, the SPI, and then put a strategy to safeguard that data. Secondly, I would also say, the strategy uh, based on the budget, because the budget is also limited based on the organization, the organization profits or organization capex which is available for that. Third thing, Dr. Bahal, is the cyber security culture, which is very important, because training the human firewall plays a very important role. And I'm emphasis on point number three, because attack starts when someone unknowingly click on the malicious link, and the injection start from the day one, and slowly, gradually, it spreads over. And people are ignoring simple basic multi-factor authentication, changing the using the default passwords. So I mean, that framework is really helpful.
Great. Dipesh?
So I completely agree, especially the last few points which Unique pointed out. But I think I mean, while we do need a proper framework, and there has to be steps to what should be done, like a playbook. But then till the time we get there and we get that level of cyber maturity, I think few things uh, which could be done at at a basic cyber maturity level for an organization. While what I completely agree with Unique, my only couple of points that I wish to add, and this comes from things that we've seen when attacks happen. Uh, Once the attack has happened, and once they've recovered from the attack, no matter how good or how bad the recovery was, uh, I've seen that these attacks are forgotten. I mean, we don't see customers or the affected parties going back revisiting what went wrong and how to fix that and learn from that, and get that improvement moving. I mean, Sanjay sir, you would be party to so many discussions where the same company gets attacked 3 times a week. I mean, that is such a bad situation to be in. You did not fix it the first time, you did not fix it the second time, and you did not do it on the third time as well. So I think that is something which organizations need to learn. Mistakes will happen. It's just that one time. That attacker needs to get in, but at least we should have mechanisms, methodologies, and the maturity that we don't let that happen second time and third time in the same scenarios. So I think revisiting an attack and learning from them and creating your own remedy mechanism because you've learned from an attack, that is something which is being consistently and continuously being missed. I think that is something which people should work on, because tools are tools. They can only facilitate to an extent. Somewhere it is the learning of the individuals that is also important. I think that is something which I wish to add on this.
Excellent, excellent points. So, I think you made some crucial points, and based on that, I want to pose a question to you. Since you are a global organization, so what are some of the similarities and differences in approaches and practices in India and the rest of the world that you see?
um, Similarities, the way I have seen is, or the improvements also, even we've also seen improvements in the similarities. So I think VAPT practices are getting more use case intense, which is a good thing to see. We are also seeing exercises specifically in large enterprises where organizations want to consider red teaming, blue teaming, even purple teaming kind of engagements. We've also had last, I think, couple of months back, we had organizations who had approached us for compromise assessment, which was a very welcome thing to see, where people invite us and to test their environment and see how what is the cyber situation they are into, if at all tomorrow something bad happens. So these things are which is an upward trend which the industry is accepting and following, uh, which is getting better. The other thing which I have noticed now, which I have not seen earlier days, is um, people are mindful of doing backups now, which was not being considered, because of late, not very recently, infrastructure was a separate team and security was a separate team. So you don't enter my boundary and I don't enter yours. That is the way organizations used to handle, and I can already see Matan smiling on that. But I think now with this convergence coming in, people looking at collaborating between teams to protect the data in whichever way they can is a welcome thing. It's being done at various levels. People are also deploying advanced tools like EDR, and while the products are moving in that direction where detection and response and all those things are being considered. Also, threat intelligence now is also a very widely accepted, and if I can use the word, in demand service, because it is one of the very few predictive technologies that exist for cybersecurity today. So these, I think, are the similarities. uh, Differences specifically, that, like I just pointed out, we need to learn from the mistakes. I think our side of the world is not doing it, other side of the world is doing it. That is something which needs
Yeah.
attention. How do we fix that? How do we, what is it that we missed that such an incident happened, and how we can make it better going forward? That is something missing. Second, I also very very strongly believe the general awareness towards cyber security is still living in two different worlds. So the enterprise class customers have a different level of cyber maturity and cyber acceptance. But if you step down from the enterprise class and you enter the mid market and the SMB market, uh, there is still this very vague belief that it will not happen to them. We are small. It will not be my organization, but it will be someone else's organization. So that culture in the mid market segment is missing. That awareness and that acceptance and the belief that you can be affected has to come in the mid market. So I think another couple of years maybe that awareness would come in, because just like the other pandemic, this pandemic also is getting more widespread and more impactful. So I'm sure this will take, I mean, the SMBs will take consideration to it, and they will also start imbibing a culture of cyber security. So I think these are the differences that I see right now.
Bob, do you want to add something to this? Because you also are seeing things at a much larger scale.
Look, I mean there is similarities. I mean, and I even look at Australia and India. Um, we are all getting ransomware attacks as well. Certainly the incidence appears to be higher than Australia, where some of the stats 68% versus 45%. But that attitude that Dipesh talked about is here as well. The attitude being, it's not going to happen to me until it happens, and then they will go and take some firm actions. However, what we are seeing is that, like India, there is a DPA. We have Data Privacy Act over here as well, and that has real fines attached to that. There are C-level executives that can potentially go to jail and be challenged if there's a data breach. So that has an effect where organizations, like in India, we've seen as well from here, um, and in Australia, taking basically affirmative action to protect the data. What we've also seen is that the government is actually, so for example, in Australia, the government is put out a ransomware bill, which basically states that if you are suffering a ransomware attack, you must report, and there are fines if you don't. So I think these are some additional things that are happening in Australia, and obviously the same is happening in America. Already has happened in America, and this will, I believe, will certainly get people to take quicker action.
Yeah, they're very crucial points, and legislation and regulations need to be looked at. I agree. Uh, Unique, Dipesh mentioned or alluded to uh, red teaming, blue teaming, etc., and all that. So, what drills are modern day enterprises conducting to battle test their respective organizations, risk management, and response to cyber events or incidents?
So one is the incident management, and it is must to have. Second is, as Ritesh mentioned, the red teaming, blue teaming, that activities the enterprises are performing. Along with that, the tabletop exercises. So who will do what in case of ransomware? One is the technical, and another is the non-technical. Who will inform to whom, and what actions are required to be taken care when the insurer will be involved, when the IR team to be involved. So these are the steps. One another, the wishing exercise we are also doing, the phishing simulations, that drills we are conducting on regular basis to see the strength, and the weaknesses as well, and based on that we take the appropriate action.
So, Martin, do you want to add something to this? Because I think
Yeah,
you have a bigger footprint with Vodafone and Idea
Yeah,
now.
true.
yeah. there are two aspects to it. In fact, continuing both the conversation from Dipesh, Bob, and as well parallelly with Unique, there are two aspects to it. One, obviously, in the ransomware part, we are forgetting the involvement of a supply chain ecosystem that we have. In today's context, especially India has, at least for past as many decades, has been safe haven to variety of technology firms, which are largely looked at as outsourced co-development, co-hosting environment, and that exists for even domestic customers like us. So, majority of the ransom events that you would come across, the impacted party would be party A, but the breach possibly would have happened from a supplier ecosystem or so. So, in whatever we do, if we are not taking adequate aspects to put them as well, the supply and the connected ecosystems to test, it will defeat the purpose of whatever we will end up doing. While I heard Unique suggesting that the readiness for the corporate is being put to test, at equal levels, we will have to include the supplier and the support
Yeah.
ecosystem as well, to be tested as adequately. That's one thing. Most often companies take it as a oversight. That's something that I'm trying to put it in practice. Just because you highlighted that, we what are we doing? That's one area that we are making some amount of trend shift towards addressing. How do we recover back from should an event like this were to happen, right? So that's one. The second, as a telco, it is also important for us to look at our enterprise ecosystem for the set of traffic that potentially passes through us. So largely, and I have come across these events when Stuxnet happened across the globe, right? So as a nodal need, what is crucial for us as a country is also to look at patterns that are getting built over, even if it is smaller enterprises, and India is rich with as many small enterprises that we have. So the ability for us to fingerprint some of these events as it happens live across enterprises, smaller enterprises as well, is very, very crucial for us to accomplish, Dr. Bell. So those are two thoughts that I thought I should share over here.
Very, very interesting. So, I think I'm going to ask you a quick question to you and Bob is on, do you think there is any role of the law enforcement in these sort of cases? And has that been effective? So, Martin and Bob, if you would like to quickly give your views, because we've got just a couple of minutes left.
Definitely. I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Now, Martin, you are on mute.
Sorry, Bob, after you. No problem. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, okay. Definitely. I think kind of my personal views is that we consider this to be a pandemic right now, and we all know what needs to happen to protect the data. But there is some reluctance of the industry to go and do that. Like any pandemic, and COVID is a good example. When it did come, there was a focus, and vaccines were developed in rapid time. So I think the framework is needed, and the government needs to put legislation in place, like what we've seen in America, like what we are seeing a bill in Australia that hasn't been passed. I believe businesses, will go to a country and do more business in that country. And I'm talking about outsource to India, for example, if somehow um, businesses feel that there's a higher level of data privacy and security. So I think law plays a very important part, and it spurs the industry and the businesses to take affirmative action to protect the data.
Yeah, Martin?
So I think definitely there is a need from a law and enforcement coordination standpoint. While corporates may at an initial point of view take that no ransom, but if you look at today, the way it has changed as a stature for the corporates is from no ransom to provisioning, at least from an insurance standpoint. How do we cater them, right? So the stand has evolved over a period because this is the reality that we live in. So an adequate guideline around how do we report back to law enforcement, because there are lot many industries in India that are fairly unregulated. So while there are regulated industries like telecom or banking sector, there are still a lot more that are fairly unregulated. So they are becoming safer havens for, say, a ransomware team to try and target them. So having a countrywide, large-scale regulation around how it should be reported is definitely a need. Yeah, but will that serve the purpose is something that we'll have to keep a watch through. Yeah.
No, I think I'll thank the panelists for educating us, and it's been a lot of learning for me. I'm sure for the audience as well. But we've reached the top of the hour, and I would like to thank all of you once again, and thank DSA for giving us this opportunity to share our views and listen to all this. Thank you very much, and over to the organizers and Smriti.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good connecting with all of you.